Imagine surviving a disaster and being encouraged to share every detail of your experience just hours later. Kaya na-aksidente ka. And then, um, binigyan ka agad ng psychological debriefing hours later after ng incident. It seems like, sounds helpful, di ba? But for some people, this can lead to greater stress or even PTSD. So before tayo mag-delve deeper sa topic na to, discuss muna natin or ano nga ba tong mga words na nabanggit such as trauma, psychological intervention, and psychological debriefing. So trauma is a response to an intensely stressful events or situation. However, people should not worry about healing kung gagaling pa ba tayo sa trauma. Of course, worry not. Trauma's effect can be long-lasting, but healing is possible. With proper treatment and social support, especially through trauma therapy, many people can overcome these negative effects, experience, and improve quality of life and move towards healing. So, what is psychological debriefing? Psychological debriefing is a type of therapy used for crisis intervention to support people who have experienced trauma. And then, the second one is the psychological intervention. A psychological intervention naman is conceived of as assisting individuals to use and develop their inherent capacities for understanding, learning, and emotional responsiveness in response to the therapeutic relationship, and especially the therapist's interpretation of the patient's motivation and strategies to arrive to more adaptive resolution. So, if the psychological interventions and psychological debriefing are used in trauma, how can they be sometimes be harmful? So, in 1989, in Hillsborough, England, there are individuals who participated in the briefing where yung mga tao na to is survivors sila ng overcrowding during a football match na nagled sa death of 97 fans and left hundreds traumatized. So, yung mga tao or yung survivors ng Hillsborough, Hillsborough disaster in England is gikandakan sila ng debriefing where more likely yung mga taong na kandakan ng debriefing doon is nakadevelop ng symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder compared doon sa mga taong hindi naka-receive ng psychological debriefing or intervention. So, ito yung according kay Bison et al. 1997. So, this outcome was attributed to the premature exposure to trauma-related memories which disrupted natural recovery processes and potentially reinforced the distress associated with the event. The next case is the Bali bombing 2002. So Bali bombing in Indonesia which killed over 200 people. So it's a longitudinal. Basta, yon. May study na reveal na yung participants doon sa um, debriefing is nakadevelop or tumaas yung level of distress over time, particularly those who were forced to recount their experience soon after the event. So we already have two cases na. So if psychological debriefing and intervention aims to elevate or reduce the stress of the survivor, so bakit mas nakakadulot sila ng harm than help? So according sa studies that around 75 of trauma survivors recover naturally without any intervention, only about 10% go to experience chronic psychological issues such as PTSD. And despite this, psychological debriefing is often applied universally, treating all survivors the same way regardless of their individual needs or readiness. So, itong psychological debriefing and intervention is para siyang one size fits all approach that can do more harm than good. So the next question is, why can psychological debriefing be harmful pag kinandak siya during first hours after the event? So firstly, highly distressed individuals daw ay those still reeling from the trauma, particularly vulnerable when these individuals are encouraged to recount their experiences too soon. So, masyadong maaga nag-recount sa kanila yung experiences na yon. So, yung memories ng event may become overly consolidated, making the trauma feel more intense. So, stress hormones may still be active in their system and can amplify this effect. So, that's the first reason. The second one is the briefing sessions usually don't assess whether a person is ready to talk about their trauma. Without this assessment, the intervention might increase their distress rather than to relieve it. Additionally, intervention should not be too soon after the traumatic event to avoid disrupting natural recovery. So, for most people, nire-recommend na mag-wait tayo 48 to 72 hours after the event before starting intervention, allowing our body to process the initial shock. And for more severe or complex trauma cases, longer waiting periods may be needed to ensure the person is ready for intervention.
Hello everyone, I am Ja, and my topic is all about the forced treatment for mentally ill individuals. So, refers to a medical intervention without consent being taken. So, and also, forced treatment for mentally ill individuals is when medical or psychological care is given to a person without their consent. So, this usually happens in situation where the person is unable to make decisions about their health because of their mental health condition. For example, they might not understand they need help or may refuse treatment even when it's clear they are in danger. Next is the involuntary treatment, which is treatment despite a patient's refusal. So, it's the compulsory assessment or treatment of people in mental health services without the person's consent being given. So, imagine you're feeling really unwell and need to see a doctor, but you're scared of needles and refuse to get a shot. So, even though it could help you get better. Involuntary treatment is like that. But for mental health, sometimes people with serious mental illnesses might refuse treatment, even though it could help them. So this is where involuntary treatment comes in. It means giving someone treatment even though they don't want it. So there are 4 broad categories of involuntary treatments of relevance to the emergency medicine provider. First is the treatment of emergency medical conditions in patients incapacitated by an acute psychiatric condition. So, for example, think of someone having a severe panic attack or a psychotic break. So, they might be confused, agitated, or even a danger to themselves. So, in this case, the emergency room doctor might need to give them medication or other treatment to stabilize them. Even if the person doesn't want it, it's like giving CPR to someone when they're not breathing. So it's like a saving measure, even if the person isn't conscious to agree. Next is involuntary admission to a mental health facility. So this is when someone needs to be hospitalized for their mental health but they refuse to go. For example, someone who's suicidal or is so severely depressed, they can care for themselves. So in this situation, a doctor can order them to be admitted to a mental health facility for their own safety. Okay, next is testing or medical therapy required to provide medical clearance for psychiatric hospitalization. So before someone can be admitted to a mental health facility, they need to be medically cleared. So this means a doctor needs to rule out any physical conditions that might be causing their mental health symptoms. For example, if someone is having hallucinations, so it's important to make sure it's not due to a medical condition like a brain tumor. So this can involve tests like blood work, x-rays, or a CT scan. Next is therapies to control acute behavioral or psychiatric crisis, including medications, seclusions, and restraint. So, for example, imagine someone having a violent outburst or is in a state of extreme agitation. So, the emergency room doctor might need to use therapies like medication, seclusion, putting them in a safe and quiet room, or restraint, using physical methods to prevent them from hurting themselves or others. Involuntary admission means that a person is admitted to hospital or treatment facility against their will, usually because they are a danger to themselves or others due to a mental health condition. This is done to help protect the person and others, even though it goes against the person's right to make their own choices about their care. So, this idea, the idea behind it is that in this case, the person's safety and well-being, the beneficence, are more important than their freedom to choose, autonomy. It's a tough decision, but it's made with the goal of providing help when someone can't make those decisions for themselves.